Broadcasting from Baltimore, Maryland, this is 5x3 Radio, where strength is for everyone. I'm your host, Emily Sokolinski, owner of 5x3 Training, a strength and conditioning gym in Baltimore, along with my co-host, Rebecca Fishburne, founder of Cornerstone Strength Maryland. Each week, Rebecca and I will discuss the ins and outs of strength training, why there is a no one-size-fits-all approach, and why strength is so important in our daily lives. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now, on with the show. Hi, everybody, and Rebecca and I are back. Yay!
After a very exciting and eventful August.
Really, it was. It seems August seems so long ago, and yet we only just got back a week ago from vacation. So,
yeah, where'd you guys go?
We went to Eastern Europe. We did a Viking cruise. Us and all.
You are so adventuresome.
65 plus patrons of this trip. I gave out my information.
I thought you meant age. Diego did have a birthday, but it wasn't 65.
No. 65. It was very civilized. I loved it. No one under the age of 18 was allowed on the ship. So when I say it was 65 and over, I mean, we were probably 20, 30 years younger than all the people on that ship.
Gotcha.
It was fantastic. It was just what I wanted. And I gave out my information to a few people. And next time we go on the cruise, I'm going to bring cards because there are quite a few people I'm trying to recruit. It was interesting. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but definitely watching people who are in that age group still traveling.
Right.
Giving them props because there was a lot going on, but you saw the ones who definitely were more able-bodied than others. And you're just thinking to yourself, man, if I could just get you squatting and deadlifting, you could take those stairs easier. You wouldn't have an issue climbing up onto the coach to, be driven somewhere. You could walk more. It would make your traveling that much better because you could tell. I heard little snippets of conversations of people about their knees and their back and their this. And I'm thinking to myself, man, just a little bit goes a long way. A little bit goes a long way. So definitely a fun time, but also, again, awareness of like why I do what I do, why we do what we do, and why it's important for people to continue to exercise and to some extent, and especially strength train. Yeah, so very relevant, very, very relevant talking about my vacation to this podcast, right? To what we do. So before we took a break in August, there was a very serious, I should say, a death occurred at a gym in Bali. So not here in the United States, but a young trainer, 34 years old, was videoing himself squatting and lost control of the bar, lost control of himself. He lost his balance at the bottom of the squat and the bar rolled over his neck. That is a freak thing. It's a freak accident that doesn't occur. Obviously a lot, but you've heard us, maybe we've talked about the benching before, and we always give a safety talk on bench because benching does, I don't want to, sound dreary or, but it does kill people. And most of the time it's because people are not paying attention to their setup. They're benching with clips on, they're benching by themselves, they're benching too much weight, right? So Rebecca and I wanted to take this time today. I know it's not a great subject. It's an important subject. I want to say it's a happy, uplifting subject, but it's an important subject. If you're going to be training in the gym, whether at a commercial gym or by yourself, you want to think about safety. You want to think about how you're setting yourself up in the rack, especially for your bench, for your squat, not so much for your press or your deadlift, but really squat and bench. I think we want to kind of take some time to really talk about that.
So it's like there's people, I mean, you hear people concerned all the time, like, like squatting a heavy bar, it's going to hurt their back or it's going to hurt their knees or whatever. So that's kind of not where we're going with this.
No,
not the form related issues or the fear of tweaks. That's a different conversation.
Yes.
And there are different things to keep in mind to avoid injury on lifts. This is more like just the hardcore, how to not die.
Yeah. We
Which is completely a freak thing. I mean, I've never gone to a gym and seen a dead body in a squat rack.
I'm not stepping over bodies at the gym, but yeah. And Diego says that at our camp, if we're doing a bench camp, he'll say, you've
got like a 0 fatality rate at all of your camps.
You can't get stronger if you're dead, right? You can't get stronger if you're dead.
And you want to avoid that.
So we don't ever I don't ever give a safety talk on squatting. I give a safety talk on bench. You give a safety talk on bench.
Yeah, and I do the safety talk on bench too. And like part of that, like you were alluding to in the beginning, is like, I guess part of the safety talk that Diego always would give was like 11 people every year on average die benching, because like you said, they're doing it at home in their basement without proper safety precautions.
Right.
Like, gross new thing in this age of social media is that a lot of times these things get caught on video because people are trying to put together what they think is going to be like an impressive or influential video up on their Instagram page, and it just ends up being tragic.
Yes.
So
yeah,
and that's what we're talking about today.
That's what exactly. And the reason I don't give a safety talk on when we do the squat is when a novice lifter comes in, they come into our gym. We have the rogue racks, and everyone squats. We have squat stands, and we have squat racks, and we have power racks. No one squats necessarily inside the power rack, and the squat racks are the ones you normally see like in someone's basement. They don't have a top to them. There's no pull-up bar. They're the ones that can fit in a good basement. A good side basement. So everyone squats outside of the rack per se. And we have safety arms. Well, I don't want to take a new lifter and point out the safety arms to them, right?
Why you don't need to give them more stuff to worry about, more stuff to think about. Like, oh, I wasn't concerned about that, but now that you pointed it out,
right. And also, I don't want them looking at those safety arms and all of a sudden they're going to be afraid, because they're already afraid of squatting, right? Most people are afraid they're not going to come out of the squat. They're going to sit down, and what happens? The last thing I want someone to do is get under a bar and know that they can dump that bar on that rack right away. Dumping a bar on a first day or second day of your program, not a good idea. Not good from a coach's perspective, because that looks like you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're putting too much weight on somebody right away. So I don't talk about failing a squat ever until that person has had there's enough time in the gym, enough time training, more weights on the bar. Then the safety arms talk comes up.
Yeah.
Why the safety arms?
Point being, you as the coach, knowing what you're doing, have taken the appropriate safety precautions for the person without advertising it or without talking about it.
Yes.
Because you've got that taken care of. It's under control. They don't need to be concerned about it because you've already set up their safety arms.
Exactly. And as you said, it's the last thing they want to talk about. The last thing that they need to hear. Right. Go ahead.
Right. And sometimes you will, sometimes you will get like, or I will get like a new person who does verbalize that question. What if I can't come out of the bottom of the squat?
Right.
Oh, don't worry about it. We've got safety arms, and I just leave it at that.
Exactly.
Don't worry about it. They're safe, but you'll be fine. We're starting at an appropriate place. And, if it's somebody that you're concerned about not being able to come out of the bottom of the squat, you're probably starting with body weight anyway. Maybe a dumbbell.
Or a box, or they got a box underneath of them, like a little plyo box, and they're sitting on that. And I say, worst case scenario, you sit down. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And the safety arms, they see them, and what I use them for is to tell them, look, that's your space. I need you to not come out of the little space that you've created with the safety arms. Stay in your box, right? Stay inside, because people like to come out of the rack and they take 25 steps back away from the rack. So it gives them an idea of you stay in this within your
safety box.
Your safety box, your frame, right? This frames your space. And they go, oh, okay. So the safety talk really is set for the bench. So let's do this. Do you want to go over the bench and how you should set up your bench properly, kind of the safety talks, and then we can also talk about the squat afterwards, because I think that's maybe what, we'll start with the bench first, because bench is really the number one. And then we can explain what to do with the squat. Would you like to go over the bench, or do you want me to go over the bench? Are we back and forth?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. So let's talk first about benching at home.
Well, I mean, so like, like we were both just kind of alluding to, most of those injuries happen when people are benching alone without other people around. Like your worst case scenario in a public gym, if it's crowded and you aren't able to get the bar back up, I mean, more often than not, there's somebody there who's spotting you and doing the reps for you than somebody leaving you to get crushed under the bar.
Someone's doing their upright rows along with your supersetting upright rows.
So there's that danger. But I mean, most of the time, even if you're, benching in a gym and you haven't asked for a spotter, if there's a sufficient number of people around, I see that all the time where people will kind of go over and mill about while someone is benching because they sort of, they're in between sets and have the sense that that person is struggling or might need a spotter or whatever. So a lot of times, you just have conscientious gym members who are looking out for each other anyway, even if the lifter hasn't considered that that's necessary. Can't rely on that though, because sometimes you're benching in an empty gym, sometimes you're benching at home. And so I guess, when we work with people, you're teaching them, that you're coaching them. So you've got your first line of defense, which is your spotter.
Right.
And of course, in starting strength, there's the big emphasis on that spotter being someone who's educated about what their job is, that they aren't supposed to be sealing your rep or doing upright rows. That's kind of another conversation. But having a spotter available is one safety precaution. If you're in the empty gym or benching in your basement, you don't have that. You want to make sure you've got your safety arms, or that you're benching inside your rack. So you've got the pin and pull. And when you're setting those up, you want them set in a place like when you get your shoulders squeezed back and down, your chest squeezed up to the bar, like your upper body, your torso is kind of inflated in a way. And so when you tap down to your touch point, the bar should be able to come to that touch point without any interference from those safety arms.
Right.
When you deflate that, if you compress your chest and let your arch sink into the bench, then ideally the bar would be able to rest on the safety arms. So you want them set at a height where it's not going to interfere with a regular bench, but be in just the right spot so that when you deflate, the arms can catch the bar. Depending on what kind of rack you're working with, that might be an idealized situation. You might not be able to achieve that. Like the rogue racks towards the bottom of the rack have the really closely spaced holes. A lot of the other types of racks, I mean, you got all rogue racks in your gym. I got a Titan rack in my basement. So there's a pretty significant jump between where those holes are. And sometimes people will sort of struggle with, how to set those up so that they can achieve that fine line of safety arms not interfering. But sometimes, like you can maybe put a towel or something like that on the safety arm to have it, like, to add a little more height to it.
That's smart.
To get it to a better,
especially if you don't have a rack where you can really dial in exactly where to set those safeties up, because as Rebecca said, you want to make sure that the bar is landing on the rack itself and not on you. You should be able to roll it either definitely over your chest, over your face, right? I'll tell people usually to kind of roll it back because it's easier to roll it over your head than kind of rolling down your belly or stomach, especially if you
and if you think about it too, like as you're laying on the bench, the distance between a comfortable space in the neck area and where the safety arms would be versus where somebody's belly or chest or whatever is going to be.
Because I've seen it, and I've been there too, where I have the spotter arms just one hole too low. It could be just a hole lower than where I should have it set, and it's sitting on the spotter arms, but it's also pushing on me. So it's not teeter-tottering on me, like there's not space under the racks, but it's definitely sitting on me and the spotter arms. Not ideal, better than teeter-tottering on you, right? I mean, because that's also what I've seen, where like the spotter arms are so low that the bar is literally kind of balanced on your chest. Not a good idea. You don't want that. But as Rebecca said, you want to make sure that when you're set up, really set up and nice and tight in that arch, you have a good, inch or so between the bar and that spotter arm. When I go over the setting of their spotters up at the gym, I'll tell people, if you have the spotter arm in the right place, it's in the right place because you checked it, right? Empty bar, you've done a couple reps, you flattened out, you let the bar sit on the spotter arms. If you're not in the right place when you're arching, you'll get a nice tactile cue, right?
Yeah.
That bar will touch the spotter arm ever so gently, and you'll know that you've lost your tightness because the spotter arm's in the right place because you checked it. So there's no reason for you to think, oh, well, I need to lower the spotter arms. Nope. You need to make sure that you stay tight. So I like that for myself because that happens to me with my left shoulder. It's always kind of the cranky one. So if I'm not engaged and I loosen up just a little bit, that bar will go tap and I'll tap the spotter arm. It's not that it's in the wrong place and too high. I've lost the tension in my back. I've lost my position. So that's what's also nice about kind of putting that safety bar in the right place is it does remind your lifter, of exactly where they should be when they're benching.
I like that too. Fifth rep reminder, fourth rep reminder. Yeah.
So you went over having a competent
spotter.
Someone's going to help me. Safety arms. What's next?
And then the other, and this is the one I end up using. I've used this twice. The bail, right? So not collaring your bar. So I guess early on during COVID, I was lifting in my basement, and it was, before I had the squat rack. So I just had squat stands.
Gotcha.
Making do with what I had, and no safety arms on that, but I hadn't collared the bar. And so I was able to dump, the weight.
Good. I
had kids in the house while I was doing this, but, they're like, you got headphones on and they're, whatever. And sometimes when this has happened for me on bench, it has been really actually not on a heavy lift day, but on a volume lift day.
Yeah, getting tired.
Day, I think a lot of times people have it in their mind, like, okay, I'm going for a PR here. I better get a spotter. But the times I've needed to dump the bar, user error, just poor judgment on my part. It has both times been volume days where one time I was in a hurry. And so I wasn't giving myself enough rest time between sets because I was trying to speed up and get out. So by the time I got to my fifth set, I was a lot more exhausted than I anticipated. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, this is my volume weight.
Yeah.
I could do this all day long, but fifth rep, fifth set, didn't want to come back up. And similarly in my basement, it was the same kind of situation. It was not the heavy, right? Like when it's the heavy lift, I pull my kid out of the other room and say, you got a spot.
Yeah.
So, that's also something I think that's worthwhile to keep in mind, making sure even on the volume days, even on the days when you're like, oh, I did, 10% more earlier in the week, no problem here. Sometimes it can.
That's a good point. That's a very good point, because I think you're right. Most people will think that they need that spotter. They may need to make sure that their spotter arms are set up on their heavy days, right? But it really is the days where they're doing a lot more work and they're getting tired and they're probably rushing through their sets, let's say, because they're like, oh, it's volume. I don't need to rest as long. And they fatigue. Their triceps give out, right? Something gives out. Something starts to give out. They start to get tired and they start missing. They'll miss a rep. That's a very good point, because I don't think people really do think about that. They think lighter bench, easier. Right. Don't need to worry about setting up my spotter arms. I know I've seen it when people get tired. The same thing. They'll get tired, or they'll rush through it, and they'll start to rush racking the bar, and they'll miss the J cup.
Really?
I've seen that too, right? Or they get tired and they don't rush racking it. What happens is they're so tired, they're trying to lock it out, and they lock it out. And as they're locking it out, they kind of move it underneath the J cup. So because they're twisting. And I've seen all of a sudden the bar hits the J cup and it's not going to go anywhere, and they're tired and they can't, and the bar comes down.
So
and that's volume.
Something along those lines, like what you're talking about with missing the J cup, which doesn't necessarily fit in with what we usually think about as part of the safety talk.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's worth paying attention on your
Yes.
empty bar set to where on the J cup your bar is hitting. Because ideally, when you re-rack the bar, you want the bar, whether it's, whatever your lift, to hit somewhere in the middle of that backstop on the
That's
J
right.
cup.
That's right.
If it's just skimming past the J, what you got to think about is that's happening while it's a light bar.
Yes.
When it's heavy, maybe you can't reach that. So, where the bar hits in the J cup is an important thing to think about when you're getting yourself set up, when you're figuring out where to put your safety arms.
Yes.
And especially if it's a different rack than you're
Yes.
used to using.
Yes, you need to. Yeah, especially so at our gym, obviously people come in, they've gotten used to where to set up, whether they're in the bench or they
Or
have to set
in
up,
my basement where I've
or
got
in
it
your basement. Right,
marked.
exactly. And what happens is, as Rebecca said, talk about missing the J cup, is that I often have to change where the J cup is sitting on people on their bench, unless they've got it marked down, unless they know in their book where it goes. Sometimes people will just put it willy-nilly, and they'll put it a hole higher. And I'm watching someone bench and I'm seeing them really have to reach to get the bar out of the rack, right? And as you said, when it's light, not a big deal. The bar comes out, the bar goes back. When it gets heavier, that bar coming out of that rack is going to be hard. But more importantly, getting it back in the rack. All of a sudden, it's kind of below the J cups. That's what I see. And I know the J cups are too high because the bar, if they're locked out, it's sitting beneath the J cup, right? You can see they're going to have to like almost tiptoe it back in, they're not going to be able to actually just kind of put it back in as easily as they think they're going to because of where they set it up. So being very mindful of, once you found where the bar needs to set, you set it. Now, different at a commercial gym, you're going to have to play around. You probably won't be able to find the best spot.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, like one of the gyms where I work, like they've got a couple benches, right? But they're, well, actually, even the one that I go to at the beach too, there's that are not adjustable, right? So like it's a set position, and just exactly what you're describing. In order for a short person with short arms like myself to unrack the bar, I have to unset my shoulders. I have to get them all loose. Let my scapulas travel all the way around to the front so I can unrack it. And then before I do my set, I've got to try under the weight of the bar to get my shoulders back into place. And then trying to put the thing back, if it's heavy, forget about it. So like if that's your situation, you've probably asked for a spotter already because you can't unrack it when it's heavy.
Right.
But in an ideal world, you would get a flat bench and pull that into the squat rack.
Yes. So if you have that, so if you're not benching at home, we'll switch over to the commercial gym, because at home you can really set up exactly what you need, right? And I like Rebecca's comment about if you have a rack that doesn't have really close holes, getting something like a towel to kind of bump up the spotter arms if they're kind of not quite in the right place. But if you put them up to the next hole, they're too high, obviously.
Oh, you know what else I had somebody do one time at home with with that sort of situation with the bench and the spotter arms didn't quite work for them. Basically, they got like a couple of boards under their bench. So they raised the bench a little bit to adjust.
That's nice. That works too.
So, I mean, you can figure a solution.
Yes. Get creative. You're basically just trying to make sure that you don't die if you're benching by yourself. Please don't do that, because again, you can't get stronger if you're dead. But at a commercial gym, as Rebecca said, they often have benches that are fixed and they have two J cups, right? One too high and one too low. They're just ridiculous. They don't work at all. So if you're in a situation and you're lucky enough that the gym you're going to has flat benches, has utility benches, and they have racks, drag that sucker into a rack, right? And try to figure out how can you set up inside of a rack to bench. Yes, it's basically a little bit more pain in the butt because you got to do a setup. But guess what? If you want to bench, and you want to bench the weight that you intend to bench that day, best to take the time to get set up properly in the rack. And maybe all you do that day is bench because you can't get to something else, But once you get quick with that, it's pretty quick to set up something like that. Once you know exactly where things have to go. First time might be kind of trial and error. But if you really can't set up properly, let's say you're traveling, like vacation or work, bench what you can, right? Just bench what you can that you can bench safely, that you've done before. Don't make that your 30 rep day. So you're tired, and you do something stupid. Just get a workout in. Just get a session in, right? Your safety is more important than the reps that you're getting that day. If you're not in your gym at home or in your gym at where you live, just always be mindful about, you control the situation. You control that benching situation. Make sure that you're benching safely. So no safe spot. Yeah.
Oh, I just had one more thing to add about. Yeah. I'm just sort of thinking about dumping the bar, right?
Yes.
Sounds easy, right? Yeah. Just dump the weight off the bar with
right. Just let it slide off.
Yeah, and I've done that twice, but you gotta be aware that what's gonna happen, because I was not aware that this was gonna happen the first time I dumped it, because I was like, oh well, I just don't have collars on there. I'll just dump the weight, right? And I'm a female. Yeah. Benching, I don't generally have like 45s on the end. So the weight as it comes off, it's a lot of smaller plates sliding off. So the first time that happened, I was sort of more smaller plates and able to realize like, oh, all of a sudden the bar is going to tip one way. Yeah. And then as soon as that weight is off, it's going to tip the other way. It's like, I don't know, kayaking in a hurricane or something, maybe. I don't know. So you get sort of flung around a little bit.
Yes.
And that's with smaller plates sliding off, 10 pounds at a time. When you start talking about dumping the weight off the bar and you're a guy doing a heavy bench, that's 45 pounds falls off one side. All of a sudden, that's going to be a lot to sort of stabilize against.
Yes.
So if you are going to dump the weight off your bar, make sure you're tight.
Yeah. Don't all of a sudden you feel that when you feel yourself having to dump the bar. Yeah. Don't just flip out and start to shake it off. It won't work. And be mindful of who's around you. So, just, be careful, there might be somebody walking by you. So
yeah, you don't want to dump the weight on somebody, but there's really not much you can do about how freaked out they're going to be by the sound.
Yes. I tell people all the time in the gym, make the noise. I don't care about noise. I care about you. If I turn around and I see plates falling, as long as they're not falling on you or somebody else, then I don't care. And one thing about weights that are sliding off the bar, bumpers don't slide easily. So if you decide you want to use bumpers when you're benching, I would recommend once you get to heavier weights, switching those bumpers out to iron plates, right? So, I mean, it's just be smart. Bumpers may look cool. Those 10-pound bumpers look like 45-pound plates. That's all cool and all that. And if you're doing your little TikTok video and you're pretending that you're benching 405,
to make it look like you're lifting. Yeah. Okay.
And then some shit happens and all of a sudden you can't, and then you look dumb. And you could be dead. So don't use bumpers. Just don't use bumpers. Use iron. They slide a lot better. I think that's don't use bumpers, use iron. So don't collar your plates, as Rebecca was saying. That way you can easily slide them off if you need to. Get a spotter, get a competent spotter. Tell them, don't touch my bar unless I'm, screaming, grab it. And make sure that you've got safeties and test those safeties with the empty bar before you start. It takes a couple seconds. Once you get into a habit of doing it, it takes no time at all. I watch my lifters all the time. First thing they do, they sit down on the bench, they start pulling out those safeties and setting them up. Right. And then I know everyone's pretty much properly set up. And sometimes they get lazy. And guess what? It's the day that they're lazy that something happens. The day they're lazy, they're doing a volume day, they're doing a light day, like you said, and then they miss the J cup, something happens, they sneeze, I don't know. A fly lands on their face, that's when something happens.
Stray hair out of a ponytail. Right.
That's when something happens. So that's the bench talk. Squatting. So we mentioned the safeties, and we don't really talk about the safeties in the beginning with a novice lifter because we don't want them worried about dumping the bar. I don't want that in their head. However, as the weight gets heavier,
Well,
that's when
as
we
the
definitely
weight
talk about
gets
it.
heavier, but also, I mean, like what you were talking about with squat before, is if you're working with a coach, the
Mm-hmm.
coach takes care of that for you without having to
Mm-hmm.
advertise it a lot. But if you are
Right.
getting started on your own
Yes.
and you're self-taught and you're in your basement getting started out squat,
There we go.
set
There
your
we go.
safety arms up. So if you're
Yep.
doing it by yourself, you got to have that in your head from the beginning.
Yeah.
To get the safety arms set up.
Yeah, you should be thinking about it in the beginning, but yes. But
You probably won't need them.
you need to, let's say this, if you're on your own, have safety arms. Make sure you buy them when you buy the rack. Make sure that they're there. Make sure that they're there from the beginning to give you especially again, to guide you. So give you a framework to like stay inside the rack. That's one thing. And I think they talk about like not taking too many steps back anyway, when you're squatting. Mm-hmm. But the safety arms are there if you're squatting by yourself. And even if you're in a gym environment, they're there to, again, take the weight of the bar so that the bar doesn't crush you, right?
Yeah.
And push, right?
So do you want to talk about how you get the safety arms set up for your lifters, like how you determine where the appropriate height is?
Yeah.
For
So
squat?
usually, it's all, depending on the person, obviously a taller lifter is going to need the spotter arms up higher. In the rack, a shorter person, they're going to be lower, but really it's based, I usually say kind of pocket height. Now that's kind of a general place for the person. We'll kind of eyeball it, but the best way to test it is you raise them up, you put them up to about your hip height, see where, you think that might be, get the bar on your back, squat down. If you immediately hit the spotter arms and you're nowhere near below parallel, obviously they're too high, right? But they should be, just like for the bench, about maybe an inch away. You should be probably an inch, maybe 2 inches away, I'd say, something like that. But basically where you end up in a below parallel position, it could be even a little bit lower if you tend to squat a little bit lower, but in a position where if you were not able to come out of the squat, you could easily control yourself back down and let the bar just settle and land on the spotter arms, and then you can simply just crawl right out from underneath the bar. I've seen people have the spotter arms too low, usually my taller lifters, too low, so they end up squatting really, really deep, having to go down lower than they should. Then they really safely should. And I've seen someone twist their ankle. So I remember somebody twisting his ankle because he went down so low because his spotter arms were not set up properly. They were there, but they weren't at the appropriate height. So he had to go down lower than he wanted to, and his ankle kind of went up from underneath of him. So that is really a test. You have to experiment. You have to set them up where you think they should be. Again, I usually say pocket height for the person, and then get on the bar and squat. Go as low as you think go below parallel. Maybe have someone watch you, maybe videotape yourself, whatever it is, to make sure that you're squatting correctly. You're squatting low, but you're not going to hit the spotter arms every single time, or they're not 5 feet, underneath of you, as you're experimenting. So, that's at the gym. That's how I do it. At home, the person has to kind of play around with it themselves. I like the idea of videoing themselves, so they can kind of see exactly where they are at the bottom of their squat. And
I'll usually, if I am at the bottom of the squat with the empty bar, kind of hang out down there just an extra minute, a second or two, and kind of look out of the corner of one eye.
That's not bad too. Yes. Yes. A little pause squat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you teach and then I teach my clients how to lower down. You can't come up. You just simply go back down. You don't panic. You just go back down. No one likes to dump the bar, but it needs to be taught as the person has gotten into their training. And if they're home by themselves, they need to learn it. They should know it by, from the beginning. Do not throw the bar off your back. Don't let anybody tell you that that's a good idea.
So the thing with that is that's what they will teach you at a CrossFit gym, is to dump the bar. And I mean, I rent space out of a CrossFit gym. They have safety arms and they have safety straps. And whenever I have a client that I need those bars for, they always have to, dig them out of wherever they keep them in
Yeah.
storage. And they kind of look at me cross-eyed, like, why don't you just teach them how to dump the bar? And so, I mean, I'll tell you, I was at whatever, the USSF,
Mm-hmm.
right? Meet out in California. And there was a lifter who came all the way from Georgia and had been lifting in a situation where when the bar was heavy, that's what they did. If they
Mm-mm.
got stuck, they would
Mm-hmm.
dump the bar. So she's in a meet,
Uh-oh.
she's doing a heavy lift. She kind of panicked, wasn't coming back up, dumped the bar, and got DQ'd on her second squat attempt, and that was the end of her meet.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
because
it was
she's gonna hurt the spotters.
spotters.
There's
Yeah.
spotters there. Let's talk about that. That leads us into, if you don't have spotter arms, again, at home, you should. If you're lifting by yourself, you need to make sure that you have safeties. I don't care what kind of safeties they are. They could be sawhorses. People can get really creative with their safeties.
Mm-hmm.
In a gym situation, let's say your gym doesn't have safeties, then you need to, or they don't have safeties, but they don't teach you how to dump the bar off your back. They have spotters. So they'll get somebody to spot one side of your bar and they'll spot the other side of your bar. Now they're not spotting you, they're spotting the weight. So as you're squatting, they are watching you go up and down and they're looking at that bar to make sure that if you can't come up, they're going to help bring that bar up with you. They're not going to bring you up. I don't teach anybody to stand behind the person. I know people do still do that. I know there are plenty of people who will stand behind the person and kind of have their arms out underneath of them. I would never want to do that. I'd be afraid of what that person might do. I mean, I've had my own lifters, very, very novice, very, very unsure of themselves, squat down, can't come up, and they don't know what to do. And they panic and they don't dump the bar. So I end up having to take the bar off of their shoulders. Now, usually it's like maybe 30 pounds. Again, these are very novice, kind of very unsecure people. I don't want to have to do that.
Actually, I had Craig did that for me once.
Yeah.
And it was like a heavy for me, but for him it was like peanuts.
Probably curled it. So
yeah, exactly.
situations
so I got
arise.
stuck at the bottom of his squat. It was like I don't know, 185 or something. He just picked the thing up off my back. Like I was like, ah.
And see, that's a situation that this young coach, trainer, and I guess influencer, this is what happened to him. He didn't have spotters. He didn't have spotter arms. He's lifting a heavy weight. His coach is behind him, not spotting the bar. And he gets down there. He's down at the bottom of the squat. He can't come up. He loses his balance. He starts going backwards. The bar goes forwards and rolled right over his neck. Unfortunate, extremely unfortunate. Doesn't often happen. I know people have seen like people snatch videos of like snatching a bar over their head and then it kind of comes down over their neck. It's scary as crap. We don't want to have to be in a situation. Those situations with the snatch, the clean, those are power lifts. Those are power as in like, you're using the Olympic lifting, right? Very different what we're talking about. We're kind of talking about controlled, more controlled. But that's what happened with this young trainer. So spotter arms would have been ideal. Having two spotters on one side of the bar for a heavyweight like that would have been better than having just that one guy who wasn't doing his job anyway, and he was his coach. So having a spotter and teaching those spotters how to spot correctly, because that's exactly it. The young girl who decides to throw the bar off her back, you're going to hurt somebody doing that. And
so
that is an instant
if you're talking about like a safety speech, though, that's probably, if you're
I
not
would never use that.
Gym, is that better? That's better than snapping your neck.
Throwing the bar off of you backwards? Yes. If you don't have anybody behind you and there are no safeties there, and you go down, make the bar go back. Don't make the bar go forward. Don't get under the bar. Don't drop your head. just throw it back. Yes. It saved your life. And I watched a video, actually. I was watching a video because a lot of videos came out after that incident. And there was a video of a coach showing people throwing the bar off their back. Again, I don't want to teach. I'm not teaching that to anybody. That's
Well,
not,
so, but
that's not
again,
good.
like you're
But
working in
have,
settings. Yeah, we're
exactly.
working in settings that have safety arms.
We
That's
have
like
safety
part of
arms. Exactly. Exactly.
standard.
But I would think that if you're in a situation, like even at a CrossFit gym, why not just get two people there to spot you? I
They're
mean,
busy doing their own WOD.
I don't. Yeah, you know what? They should have. That's for whatever. We're not going to go into that. That's a whole other subject. But if you're home squatting by yourself, make sure your rack has safeties. If you're at a commercial gym and there's safeties there, make sure
Use
you're
them.
squatting with the safeties. Use them. Please use them. If you don't have safeties and you like the people at your gym and you ask them, hey, can I get a spot? Can you have one on? And then tell them what you need them to do. They'll probably, they'll help you out. At our gym, I can control the situation. I make sure everybody stays safe. And Rebecca, with her clients, same thing. But be smart. Use common sense. You are in a controlled environment, but things can still go wrong. You can stay even more controlled by making sure that you are training and lifting in a manner that will keep you continuing to train. It's pretty simple. It's that simple. It's that simple because anything can happen. I thought I saw a bird in the gym today. I was benching and I saw this thing flying down, and it was a reflection actually from outside, but I couldn't tell that, right? So I'm like, my God, there's a bird in the gym. And birds fly in the gym all the time, but it was so weird because I was just about to start my bench and I finished my set and I racked and I sat up and there was nothing there. But things can distract you. Things can always distract you. Anything else for the squat that we didn't mention?
Oh, I guess the only other thing I was thinking about that is sort of similar to the safety arms on the bench
Uh-huh.
giving you an audible cue about your
Yes.
form.
Mm-hmm.
That can happen also with your safety arms on squat. Like, a lot of times when people are coming up out of the squat and their hips travel faster than their shoulders,
Yes, 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 yes,
or
yes.
you get, tipped forward a little bit, your bar might bump into the safety arms. So that can be distracting. But also the silver lining to that is it's a good audible cue about how to get what you need to do in the moment to get
And
tighter.
yes,
Whatever.
yes. And if your spotter arms are set correctly and they are, and you do that, like you said, it gives you an idea. It lets you know that you did something off. You came out of balance. And I've seen my clients do that. And I've said to them, your spotter arms are correct, right? We already tested that. So what did you do? You went forward, right? You let your chest, let something relax. And they're like, yeah, I know, I did that. Something I wanted to mention too, that's in same thing as in the bench, your J cups. If your J cups are too high and you're having to tiptoe out of the rack to get set up for your squat, and then you have to tiptoe to get back to the rack, they're too high. Lower them. Lower is always better, right?
Almost.
Right, almost.
Unless you're hitting completely above the J cup.
And the same thing with lighter weight, with the empty bar, with 65 pounds, even with 95 pounds, might be very easy to take that bar out of the rack. The minute that weight gets heavy, it's going to be a lot harder. And if you're tiptoeing a heavy weight out of the rack and then you have to tiptoe it back in, you easily could miss the J cups. I've seen people miss the J cups constantly when they're squatting. That's another safety talk. So we talked about the safeties, but just in general, squatting, and this goes back to the bench too. When you're racking a bench, right, making sure you completely lock out your arms and put the bar back, let it hit you can hear it hitting the uprights. Kind of, you might even want to look a little bit to make sure the bar's over the J cups. The squat works the same way. Walk into the rack, hit the uprights, take a little look from right to left, then lower the bar into the J cups. People like to kind of do one part of the bar at a time. Always a recipe for missing a J cup, right? Because you put one side in and then you just go to put the other side in, but the bar is now underneath the J cup. You can't dump the bar in the squat typically, unless you're not using collars. And many people don't use collars in the squat, and that's fine. You don't have to necessarily use collars in the squat. It just, the plate's kind of climbing around a little bit. But usually they're collared. So if that happens, that plate can't slide off because it's collared. So be mindful when you're walking the bar back into the rack, which leads me to another point about safety when taking weights off the squat. It's especially more so. No, I wouldn't say it for guys because my mother did this. She racked her bar. She was pressing, and she had a lot of plates on it because she was using a technique bar. She took all the plates off of one side, and the bar just tilted right over and fell on the floor. Made a lot of noise because she didn't have enough weight on one side, right? So I've seen plenty of people stripping 315 off their bar, and they strip all
on the right, and then they put no left side.
And all of a sudden, the bar just tilts right over. So please be mindful when you're taking the plates off of the rack. Always try to keep everything kind of even. The 135, you take a 45 off of one side, you're fine.
Yeah.
220, 225.
225, yeah.
You're good with 225. The minute you get up to 315, you got 345s on each side, and you decide to peel all 3 plates off of one side. Recipe for that disaster. The bar's going to tilt, and you are going to hear a loud noise, and it's not going to be very pretty.
And make sure your face isn't over the
make sure no one's there. But it happens even with lighter bars. Like I said, my mother, she loaded up her bar. That's why I tell people, try to put as few plates on as possible. People are piling on 2.5s. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Well, I was adding this. I'm like, you got like 5 10s, 4 5s.
That's like I used to do though, Emily, with the tapas bar.
It's lazy loading.
No, in my case, it was like I was afraid of those 45s.
Yes, well.
So I'd just do tapas. All small plates.
I understand if you do like a 25 and 2 10s kind of thing, and you're trying to, because you got to do some drop sets. But if you're loading that bar and then you peel all those plates off, and that other side has 3 10s and 4 5s and 6 2.5s, what do you think is going to happen? So again, be smart, just common sense, which sometimes people often lack.
Myself included.
I have never done that. I'm sure I have. I'm sure there's times where I've made mistakes. Yes. But overall, after how many years in the weight room now, kind of, so you have to teach that. You have to teach it. It's almost not learned. Sometimes people have to learn how to, have gym plate etiquette, I'd say, in the gym.
Safety
etiquette. So yeah. I hope that this has helped any of you who are either lifting at home by yourself or, at a commercial gym, and you're like, man, I taking the time to get set up and this and that. Take the time, check. If you're not checking that your safeties are up, definitely do that. If people are coming around trying to collar your plates when you're benching, take those collars off. If other people are collaring their plates, that's on them. No need for you to stick your nose in it. It's not your business. But keep yourself safe. If anybody's got questions or concerns about anything that we talked about today, we're happy to address it. If you got other questions about safety, again, happy to talk about anything. So share your thoughts with us. You can always email me at emily@5by3.com. You can also contact Rebecca at
cornerstonestrengthmaryland@gmail.com.
So we are, again, still trying to get our friend, Fred, on our podcast to talk about mental health and lifting. So we're trying to organize that because he lives all the way out in Minnesota, I think. So, there's a little bit of time difference since he's busy, but he's definitely game for coming on the show to talk about things. And I definitely want to get him on. So if you, again, have any ideas for topics, we'd love to hear from you. Always interested in to hear what people want us to talk about. And we'll be back in a couple weeks with another 5x3 radio podcast. And it will be October by then, I think, possibly.
I think we're about halfway through September.
Yeah, seriously. So it might be October already. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Enjoy. And we'll be back soon. Thanks, Rebecca.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks for listening to 5x3 Radio with Emily and Rebecca. If you like our show and want to know more about 5x3 training, please visit us at www.5, that's F-I-V-E, the letter X, the number 3.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. To learn more about Rebecca, please visit her website, cornerstonestrengthmaryland.com. Thanks for listening and have a great week.